This is Larry Bothe. He is a past FAA Designated Pilot Examiner, currently a lead FAAST Team Representative and Gold Seal Instructor in Southern Indiana. He's rated in Airplane Single-Engine Land, Airplane Single-Engine Sea, Airplane Multi-Engine Land, helicopters, and gliders. His pilot certificate is about that thick. Larry's also a Master Certified Flight Instructor Emeritus, FAA Master Pilot, has 9,000 hours or more than 100 types of aircraft. He is half owner of a 1961 7EC Champ, and he may be contacted at his email address, which is lbothe, his name, at comcast.net. So Larry, I'm going to give the stage to you. They're all yours, sir.
Jason, thank you. Are you clapping because I'm coming on or because he's going away? Never mind. Okay, it's good to be back in the Safety Center again. I haven't spoken here for a while. And I like doing these things, so we have a fair amount of information to present. This is only the second time I've done this checklist presentation. And I'm doing it here today because the gentleman that schedules all these presentations for the FAA asked me if I would do it. He likes this subject. And I want to tell you that I sent him the whole slide deck the way I had it done, and he said, oh, let's add some stuff. So Jay added things to it. So this is partly contributed directly by the FAA, so I'll blame it on them. But anyway, it's fun. I'm glad he helped because it's more thorough, so that's pretty neat. By the way, if you're interested, the way they create these things, how do you get these presentations? The FAA sends out a call for presentations early every year, like in January, and then those of us who would like to present respond and tell them what topic we'd like to present on and send a paragraph or two about it. And I suggested doing checklists because I wanted to do it at the seaplane base on Monday this week, and I usually present there every year on Monday afternoon. So Jay responded and said, yeah, that's good, but I like the topic, why don't you send me your slides? And then we got into the editing thing. So by the time we got finished doing that, it's way different than it was when it started earlier in the year when I suggested it. But I thought it was kind of neat that the FAA wanted to help me do this, because they don't usually do that. They'll just take what's in your written description, and if they like it, they'll let you speak. And if they don't, well, they don't. Okay, so anyway, that's how I got to doing this. Jay wanted me to talk about 2 pilot operations where you checklists that are challenge and response. But I personally have never earned a living flying, even though I have all these hours that Jason mentioned. So I said, you know, Jay, I don't have any experience with it. I'm not comfortable talking about it. He said, okay, you don't have to talk about that. So we're not going to do challenge and response. All right, so that's a little background about how these things come about. So why was I interested in doing it, though? Okay, they told you I used to be a pilot examiner. And so I get to fly all these different airplanes with all these people, different skill levels, and a lot of old airplanes, and I saw some of the crappiest, most useless checklists you've ever seen. They're falling apart, you can't read them, they're crunched. They are the original checklists that came with the airplane, but how old's our fleet now? 40 years average age for light general aviation airplanes, something like that. They've all been modified, right? They have new radios, and the ADF is gone, and so forth and so on, have had autopilots installed, and the checklists just don't really apply. And even flight schools will do that. You think flight schools would know better, right? Nick knows, but Nick's are modified. I've examined Nick's students. But he has good checklists. But some flight schools can't get around to doing it, and they have modified airplanes with checklists that don't apply. Say what? but they do that. So I decided back in 2017, the first time we created the original version of this, because I decided I wanted to talk about people doing a better job with checklists. And we also find that training in checklist usage is inadequate. And Jake asked me to talk about that. And that people do checklists at inappropriate times. Like they're taxiing along where you have to watch where you're going at the airport, and they're running a checklist while they're taxiing and not looking where they're going. That's not a good idea. So serious safety issues can come about from this. And by the way, in order to get to speak here in the Safety Center, the topic you want to talk about has to be primarily safety related or have a strong safety relationship. You just can't come up here and entertain people. So what we're going to cover today then is we're going to talk about the fact that there are a whole lot of these old airplanes around. Talk about student pilots and checklists, because the checklists that come with airplanes from the manufacturer are not student pilot friendly, and they make flight instructors work real hard. I already mentioned that there are old crummy falling apart checklists, but you know what? You can go to pilot supply places, and for common airplanes, you can buy shiny new laminated checklists, but you know what? They have the same old outdated information in them, they're just shiny and new. So they're not much better. One of the very best things you can do with an airplane is just simply create yourself a checklist for the airplane that you regularly fly, or if you own it, whatever. When I was instructing a lot, I created checklists for flight school airplanes to match what the airplane had in it. We're going to talk about when to use checklists, talk about interruptions and distractions from checklist usage, and where we go from here. And I'm pretty sure, based on doing it at the seaplane base on Monday, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. So airplanes have new radios, they have GPS, they have ADS-B. Many airplanes have large multifunction displays. They're sporting iPads, right? iPads have taken over the airplane world. I have one on my Champ. A lot of airplanes now, people are adding fuel totalizers, fuel monitoring systems, but in order for them to work right, you have to do things with them. Well, needs to be in the checklist, right? Autopilots, and in many cases, original checklists were inadequate when the airplane was new. My 1961 Champ didn't come with a checklist or an owner's manual, POH, they didn't call them POHs back then, right? You got like a trifold brochure that back then they expected your instructor to tell you about it. But these days we ought to have one. And we have the falling apart thing. So, I want to cover all that stuff with respect to old airplanes. The checklists are really lacking. Man, I can't say that fast 3 times. I mentioned about students. Manufacturers' checklists, especially ones from Cessna, right, the most common airplanes, assume that the pilot has prior knowledge. And you know what? New students don't have any prior knowledge, new basic students. And so then when the instructor is teaching the student to fly, they keep having to remind them to do things because they aren't in the checklist. So making a student-friendly checklist is a really worthwhile activity for flight instructors because it does 2 things. It saves the instructor from having to keep reminding students to do things that aren't in the checklist. And the other thing is, it really helps the student build confidence, because now they can do things themselves. They can think, oh yeah, I can really learn to fly this thing, and I can do the correct thing without somebody reminding me of something else every other minute that I forgot. So there's two real good reasons to build student-friendly checklists. And it also saves the CFI a lot of time. So you can learn more in a lesson. Checklists come in a variety of forms. Plastic laminated cards are by far the most common, but some of them are on groups of cards, several of them. Sometimes they're held together with a little like key ring or a tie wrap. I'm not real thrilled by them. The newer Cessnas, like the 182s with glass panel with G1000, they have the checklist in a spiral bound notebook. But I have about 160 hours flying one of those things, a 182. And that checklist was a big pain in the neck because you had to put the book down somewhere where you could see it. You put it on your lap and it'd slide off, fall on the floor. I actually took the items out of the checklist in that the book in that airplane and made a single two-sided pretty big card with the same items on it. And that is much easier to keep control of. Some airplanes have a screen, a scrolling device. You can put checklists on a multifunction display or an iPad. All that stuff's okay. I'm not down on it, but you just has to be in a place where you can really use it. So if I convinced you that maybe you ought to consider creating a custom-made checklist for all the reasons I've mentioned, here's a few things to consider. First of all, you certainly want to keep all the things that the manufacturer put in their original checklist, because we're certainly not smarter than the engineers that designed the airplane. However, if stuff has been removed from the aircraft, it's just simply not there, well then don't put that in your new checklist. That's okay to take out. Try to divide checklists into logical sections instead of just one giant long list. You know, pre-flight inspection, starting the engine, pre-taxi, and have points underneath each category. Especially helps students to know where they are. Some of the aftermarket checklists that you pay good money for, they're trying to cram a whole lot of stuff into one card. And anyway, they use font that's so small. It's like, excuse me, please pass the magnifying glass so I can read this thing. I mean, horrible. Don't do that. Not everyone has real good eyesight. If you're making them, try to stay at 12-point type font size or above. 12-point works pretty well. If there's been new equipment added to the airplane, do add that in appropriate places in the checklist. Add items for students, like simple things like where it says turn on the radios, then I have put on your headset, because they don't think of it, they're new. Pay attention to logical order and try to make stuff, emphasize things that are important. Well, how do we do that? In text, you can use bold, underline, or italics. And as they said in my marketing courses, color sells. Use color. Color is a good way to emphasize things. So I have some sample checklists that I want to show you. And I'm going to start out by saying, don't panic. We're not going to go through them line by line. We'd be here all day. But I want to give you some ideas of some of the things that we talked about. As Jason mentioned, I own and fly a 1961 Champion 7EC. It's an Aeronca Champ with an electrical system. And I didn't get a checklist with it, as I said. American Champion Aircraft owns a type certificate now, and they were building them up until about 2008. So one of the first things I did was I bought a POH from them for the 2008 model. Last year they published one, and that gave me some clue about their checklist. The airframes are almost identical. The engine's different, but a lot of it's very close. So that was a help for a starting point. So I'll show the checklist in a minute, but we're going to pay attention. We had manufacturer's items, help for students, number of cards. I just have front and back. And any of these sample checklists, by the way, I'll be happy to send you a copy if you send me an email. Jason mentioned what it was in the introduction, but it'll be on my last slide if you want to see it and write it down. So the first checklist is for my airplane. So here's what it looks like. So I used some color, and I have taught a few people to fly it, so I was trying to be mindful of students. So I did a pre-start section, tell people how to get into it and close the door and so forth. Got into starting the engine. Now, those of you who own airplanes know that not all engines start the same, right? Airplanes' engines seem to have their own little idiosyncrasies in each installation. So I know what makes mine start well, so I suggested a number of shots of prime and how to start it to get it going. Reminded them to set the throttle at 1,000 RPM when sitting still so the spark plugs don't foul. That's not in manufacturer's checklist. And then my avionics are new. I assure you the airplane didn't come from the factory with an avionics master switch. But when I put decent radios in it, I had the shop install an avionics master switch. Well, now it needs to be in the checklist so people know to turn it on. There's an example of a modification. I have ADS-B out. I do it with a UAvionics tail beacon, incidentally mounted inside the fuselage. But now you have to turn the navigation lights on because that's the way the STC reads. You're required to wire it the way UAvionics says and the way the STC calls it out, and that's through the nav light system. So in the daytime, you got to turn the nav lights on, so my ADS-B out works, and so forth. So this is just an idea of what you need to do. Before takeoff, I have mixture full rich. That's for me. I taxi the airplane around with the engine lean so the spark plugs don't foul from prolonged low RPM usage. But that's fine, but you got to remember to go to full rich. So I made that big bright red for me. Anyway, so that's the idea of a modified checklist for an old airplane. This was a Jay thing. He said, hey, talk about emergency checklists. And one of the things we spoke about on the phone was, where do you put your emergency checklist? We don't use them very much, right? So they're not out anywhere. So in most airplanes, they're stuffed in some seat pouch or a thing in the door. And if you have an emergency, you could spend 5 minutes trying to find the checklist. You'd have crashed already. But I had Jay covered on this one. My emergency checklist is right over the window at the front seat. Fly my tail dragger from the front. And that's where it's always been. He didn't need to tell me to do that. I've incidentally had a few engine failures, so I'm a little sensitive to this. So mine's right up there. The other thing is, put it on some color paper that makes it stand out. So when I created my checklist, I put it on pink paper because it's easy to see and it stands out from the rest of the airplane's interior. said, I stuck it up over the left window in the window frame. So that's the kind of things that that I did with my airplane, and are good examples of custom checklists. Here's one I did for a Cessna 172. I have to confess, in the last line on the slide, to get it on one piece of paper, two sides, I had to go down to 11-point type. So I gritted my teeth, and it's a little small, but that's what I ended up with. Here's what it looks like. I did this one. I'm not around this air. I used to teach in this airplane. I haven't changed it because I hadn't realized about using color when I did this one. But this is way better than the Cessna checklist because it has the extra things in it for students, and it's more logically grouped, and it has in it about the setting the fuel totalizer and so forth. It makes everything in the airplane work. The airplane has a Garmin 750 radio in it, so it's got way better radios than when it left the factory. Let's see. And it does things like remind people to bring the power back to 1,000 RPM if they're going to sit for any length of time so the spark plugs don't foul. After landing checklist, it says on shutdown, shut off the avionics and so forth, but then it's for students. So we tell them, put the key on the clipboard, gather up all the trash, and take all the stuff to the office, because we're trying to remind them to do a complete job. So that's the kind of things you can add to a checklist if it helps. And here's an additional listing of things that are in that checklist. Writing down the Hobbs meter readings, that's not in the factory checklist. Passenger briefing. As a DPE, I was expecting my applicant to give me a passenger briefing because they're flying as pilot in command, right? And we say to the applicant, well, for a few minutes here, just treat me as if I was a friend of yours from up the street that you're taking for a ride. And I'm trying to get him to give me a briefing. So they'll say, you have your safety belt buckled, sir? I go, yeah, I do. But that's only half of it, right? The other half is you have to tell passengers how to get out of the airplane in case of an emergency, just like they do in airliners. Same rule. So I'm looking for that, and so I added it to the checklist, and I put it in bright yellow so that people could be reminded. Shoulder harnesses. Old airplanes don't have shoulder harnesses. Mine didn't come with them. I added them because they're much safer. So now you have to remind people to use the shoulder harnesses if you've added them. It's much easier to close the door with the window open. You don't have to slam it real hard to get it to latch and beat the heck out of the door. Put it in the checklist. Don't beat the airplane up. And so forth. I said I wouldn't read every line. I won't. Same sort of thing has to do with starting the beacon. When the airplane was made, you didn't have to have the beacon on when the engine was running, right? So it's not in the checklist. But since 1994 or whenever they passed the rule that the beacon has to be on whenever you run the engine, so add it to the checklist. Talked about some of the stuff to help get the airplane started. Now though, look at this in green. This stuff's all added to that checklist. None of these things were in the checklist, and all of them are to help students. So I added all this stuff so that they know to do it, and then I could sit there in the airplane and they would step through it. By the time they got finished, by golly, they were ready to fly. I didn't have to remind them, and they felt confident that they could do the work. modern avionics are way different than old radios, right? So we put that in. Fuel flow meters, flaps up before taxi, that's not in the checklist, right? You leave the flaps down, blow stones into the flaps, beats the heck out of it. So we'd like them to put them up. So that's it for the Cessna 172 one, and I did the same thing with before takeoff. As I said earlier, I'm willing to share these checklists with anyone that sends me an email. I'll send you the file. I'm sure I didn't skip anything I wanted to there. I don't think so. That's okay. So anyway, I don't want to go through all that line by line. Here's something that's important though, the last one in the green on this slide, heels back. Trying to get people to not drag the brakes on takeoff. You have to pull your heels back, put your toes on the bottom of the rudder pedals, right? People want to put their feet, especially students, all the way up because they want to be able to push on the brakes all the time. And then they're going down the runway for takeoff and their feet are up where they touch the brakes. Now, we'd like to accelerate for takeoff, thank you, not use brakes. Yeah, we created an after landing checklist for it. There was an after landing checklist from the manufacturer, it wasn't too bad, but then we do the shutdown stuff we talked about. All right, so then the last one we'll talk about for a minute. I mentioned that I used to fly a Cessna 182 with G1000, and which has a really thick POH, by the way. There's two POHs. There's a quick start POH, which is only about, I'm doing this from memory, about 30 pages for quick start. God forbid you should get slow start. And then the real POH for the airplane, it's a tome. It's like reading War and Peace. But anyway, the checklists were very cumbersome because they were in this book, and they started on like page 9 or something, and it wasn't right at the beginning. So I created checklists that look like this for the 182. They're much simpler to use. And so I encourage you to try to do that with airplanes that you fly a lot. Okay, let's talk about using checklists. Checklists are no good at all if you don't use them, so they have to be where you can get them. And using checklists is a mindset that has to be taught by instructors. And I'm old enough that I don't care about being embarrassed and telling things that I did back in the day when I wasn't very bright, I guess. I flew the same 172 for 16 years, put a couple thousand hours on it, and I owned it. Well, I don't know, somewhere about halfway through that, I got so smart that I didn't use the checklist anymore. And it's a pretty simple airplane, so mostly I got away with that. But then I got lucky. I sold the 172 and moved up and bought a 182. Well, by this time I had gotten used to not using checklists. It's called safety creep. The current issue of FAA Aviation Safety has an article in it about what the author calls safety creep and how people sort of back away from using checklists over time. They become complacent and they just don't think they need it anymore. Well, guess what? I was forgetting all kinds of stuff flying this 182. I forget to have the cow flaps open for takeoff. It had an autopilot. If you're going to use that, you got to check that the disconnect switch works, and there were a bunch of other things. So you can't be too darn smart to use the checklist. And as a pilot examiner now, when we would have a student pilot, we have to observe a pre-flight inspection. You didn't in the old days, but you do now. And if an applicant would do an entire pre-flight inspection and never refer to the checklist at all and tell me the airplane was ready to fly, they were in serious danger of failing. Because the FAA takes checklist usage very seriously. I'm not kidding. And I get this crap about, oh, I own it, nobody else flies it, you don't have to check all that stuff, because I'm at CFI, I do flight reviews, right? I get that kind of stuff. No, let's not go there. But you don't have to carry a checklist around. There's lines painted up here. They're filming me, and I'm not allowed to cross the lines or I'll be off there. I'll be out of the range of their lens. Because I can walk around a little. You don't have to have a checklist in your hand while you're doing a pre-flight, because so many things in pre-flighting airplanes require two hands, right? You want to push up on the aileron and then check the pivot point for the actuating rod. It takes two hands. And if you're carrying a checklist, you drop it, it's a pain. The FAA only makes sure that you refer to it. So it's okay to do a pre-flight to get the checklist out. I tell students that once you get the hang of what you're going to check, in some ways you can let the airplane be its own checklist when you get to it, inspect it, right? But then put the checklist on the pilot's seat where you're going to sit down. And when you get all the way around the airplane, come back, you pick it up and go down through it and make sure, oh, I didn't climb up and check the fuel. That's okay. Want to check right with it. If they forget something, that's what the checklist is for. So now you go and do the item that you skipped and carry on. That's a perfectly acceptable way to use it. You don't have to carry it in your hand. So for most of us that just fly for ourselves, checklists are really almost like a do list. It tells you what to do. And that's fine. But at least use them. One of the things that happens to us is when we do things that require checklists, and pre-flights are real common. You're trying to pre-flight the airplane, and a friend walks up, how you doing, Larry? Haven't seen you. How's the wife and kids, right? And so you get interrupted. And so you talk to your friend to be polite, and now you're going to go back and finish the pre-flight. If you're not using a checklist, you have to skip 2 or 3 items right there just because you got interrupted. Or you're working on it, you hear an engine noise, and you look, and some really neat airplane goes by. You go, wow, look at that. I haven't seen one of those things for a long time. And you skip something. Checklists save you from doing that. ATC messes you up sometimes. They go, Cessna 1234 X-ray, I have your clearance. So now you're going to stop and write down a clearance, but you're in the middle of a checklist. So it's pretty easy to get interrupted and skip something. And it's especially bad if you're not using a checklist, you won't get it back. Okay. So, in conclusion then, almost all airplanes will benefit from a custom-made checklist. Now maybe if you go out and buy a shiny new Cirrus with a shiny new checklist, it'll be perfect for that airplane. But I don't know about you that I don't often get to fly a shiny new Cirrus. Student pilots really find that checklists with added details for students really helps them out. And by the way, saves the instructor a lot of work. And old students, same thing. Technique reminders about where's the wind coming from. Be sure to turn the ailerons into the wind. for crosswind is a big help for students. And some flight reviews that I do, people don't pay much attention to wind when they should. So I say, what are you waiting for here? Get up when you go home from Oshkosh, make yourself a custom-made checklist. But if you're going to do that, though, after you create a custom-made checklist, don't rush down to the office supply place and have it laminated. Take it to the airplane and use it a few times, because the first couple times through, you're going to find out that you skipped something or put it in the wrong place or whatever. So scribble on it and fix it, and then go home and make the corrections on your computer. Then print a nice clean copy and have it laminated to put in the airplane. If you're a CFI, give your new student-friendly checklist to your students. Let them run down through it and see what they actually do with it. That'll tell you what you have to change before you have it laminated. And so that's it. So here's my contact information. You turn your cell phone back on, and I would do any questions. And the woman in the back, she's going to bring you a microphone, or one of these people, so everyone can hear, including me.
As you mentioned, iPads are taking over the world, and I have a Garmin 530. Is it possible to create the checklist in ForeFlight and export it to the Garmin panel without having to retype it into the Garmin panel?
I don't know. When you don't know, you need to fess up my best answer to that is I go over to the ForeFlight booth, Jepson ForeFlight has a giant tank, and ask them. They'll give you the straight answer. Where else?
When you started out, you mentioned when you're taxiing out, going through the checklist. I know that was brought up for my daughter here, that's a new student. Her instructor was asked to do that for the new students by the management of the airport to save on the cost of the rising price of the gas and that. So I really like that you pointed that out. I just wanted to emphasize that.
Okay, I didn't really, I'll tell you, I didn't get all that, but...
When, in the beginning of the talk, you mentioned going through your checklist, why taxing, and how that's a no-no.
And how...
You shouldn't be doing that. It's not very safe to be taxing and going through your checklist. That's the way I understood what you had said.
Okay.
He's just saying you shouldn't be doing checklists while you're taxing. You should taxi, not checklists.
Oh yeah, you should either taxi or run the checklist. If you need to run a checklist, get down by the whole chart line and stop, and then you can do your run up, run the checklist, set up your radios properly. You don't want to do that in flight either. Don't get me started on that subject. And so you should be doing these things one thing at a time if you want to be safe, right? Where this is a talk about safety here. Who else might have a question? Please.
There's something new out. It's a digital checklist. It plays over your headset. And it just came out through the North Sea program. So it works for certified aircraft or non-experimental. And so I get in the plane, I click the start, and it starts, I put my voice in it, turn on the master switch, turn on the alternator charging, you can put in.
What, we're getting that.
How's that, better?
Is that better?
Okay. Maybe. Hello? There we go. So now it's an add-on, and it comes right through my headset. Because I have a technically advanced aircraft with all glass, there's a lot going on, and it's modified with the stall kits and all that. There's a lot to check.
So you get your checklist in your headset, yeah. And so then when does it know to move on, or do you push a button to get it move on?
It has a little remote. Yes or no? Yep, check it.
Okay, I have not worked with that, so I guess I don't feel too, but I can imagine that technology is available if you like it. I sort of like to look at the printed line personally, but I'm old school.
I also have the 3 laminated, one for mountain, one for your walk around and your safety, your red checklist. But I really like that digital one that comes through the headset because of complacency.
Okay, good.
I just let
Thank
you know
you.
that this is out there.
Yes, Nick. I know him.
So I had the benefit of flying with Larry over the years, so I have some of this too. Some of the other things that we've added to the headset checklist. How do you do the exterior? Anyway, but some of the things that I've added, like I fly different airplanes like Stearman's and that kind of stuff. When I on the checklist, I have what the static RPM should be. So like the 65 horse Champ, some of those underpowered airplanes, when I bring the throttle up, before you start rolling, you're in the middle of a static RPM check. And so I put on there, it's like, okay, minimum RPM in the Stearman, I don't remember now, 1900 RPM and the Champ and that kind of stuff. So I know in those first moments when I apply power that I'm
Right, that you have enough power for takeoff.
that the plane is operating.
And oh, by the way, you have oil pressure, right?
Right, and also I'll put little things like what the tire pressure should be. I have a little list of like the local airports real quick and their CTAFs. So if you got some white space, those are some of the little things that I've added to your suggestions for checklists.
Yeah, whatever works for you in your environment. Nothing wrong with adding those things. Anybody else? Well, if there are no other questions, then thank you all for attending and have a good show.